To remove and install the front half shaft on your RZR Trail or Trail S, follow these steps. Park the vehicle on a flat level surface and ensure it is in park. Next, remove the center cap from the wheel. Then, remove and discard the cotter pin from the wheel hub castle nut. Continue by loosening the castle nut. Next, loosen the lug nuts while the vehicle is on the ground, but do not remove at this time. Then, safely elevate the vehicle. Reference your owner's manual for proper lifting techniques. Once safely elevated, remove the lug nuts and set aside. Then, remove the wheel and set aside. Next, remove and retain the brake shield fasteners and set the brake shield aside. Then, loosen the pad adjuster screw 2 to 3 turns. Continue by removing and retaining the caliper mounting fasteners. Then, carefully remove the caliper from the brake hub and support it with a wire hanger, rope, or retention strap to avoid damaging the brake line. Next, remove and retain the castle nut and cone washer from the front wheel assembly. Then, pull the front wheel hub assembly off the half shaft. Next, remove and discard the lower ball joint pinch fastener and nut. Then, lightly tap on the bearing carrier while removing the lower ball joint end. A pry bar may be used to help separate the bearing carrier from the ball joint. Use care not to damage the ball joint boot. Next, remove and discard the upper ball joint pinch fastener and nut. Then, lightly tap on the bearing carrier while removing the upper ball joint end. Next, remove the drive shaft from the front bearing carrier by pivoting the carrier out. Before continuing, inspect both ball joints for any wear or damage and replace if necessary. Then, with a short, sharp jerk, remove the drive shaft from the front gear case. Next, clean the anti-seize off the drive shaft splines using a clean, dry cloth. Then, inspect the threads and splines on the half shaft for nicks or burrs and replace if needed. Continue by inspecting the CV boots to ensure there are no cuts, wear, or damage and replace if needed. Next, remove and discard the compression ring on the drive shaft. Then, install a new compression ring into the groove on the end of the drive shaft, and ensure it is fully seated. Before installing, clean any old anti-seize from the gear case and hub assembly. Then, apply new anti-seize to the splines on the half shaft. Next, align the splines on the half shaft with the front gear case, and push in firmly on the shaft until the compression ring is fully engaged in the gear case. If necessary, use a rubber mallet to tap on the outboard end of the drive shaft to help with installation. Continue by installing the drive shaft into the front bearing carrier. Next, reinstall the upper ball joint end into the bearing carrier. And loosely install a new pinch fastener and nut. Then, reinstall the lower ball joint end into the bearing carrier. Maneuvering the bearing carrier may help align the ball joint into the carrier. And loosely install a new pinch fastener and nut. Continue by torquing the fasteners to specification. Next, align the wheel hub with the drive shaft spline and maneuver onto the shaft until fully seated. Then, reinstall the retained washer with the domed side out and castle nut. Tighten the castle nut until fully seated. Next, carefully slide the caliper assembly onto the brake disc, ensuring the brake rotor is between the two pads. Before continuing, ensure any items used to secure the brake caliper are removed from the wheel well. Then, align the caliper with the mounting holes on the front hub and reinstall the retained caliper fasteners. Continue by torquing the fasteners to specification. Next, tighten the set screw on the back of the caliper and turn the screw until the pads touch the brake disc. Then, loosen the set screw a half turn to allow the brake disc to move. Next, align the brake shield with the mounting holes on the caliper and reinstall the retained shield fasteners. Then, torque the fasteners to specification. Next, reinstall the wheel on the vehicle and tighten the lug nuts until fully seated. Then, safely lower the vehicle until the tires begin to touch the ground. This will help keep the wheel in place when torquing. Once lowered, torque the lug nuts to specification in a crisscross pattern. Then, torque the wheel hub castle nut to specification. Continue by inserting a new cotter pin and bend around the castle nut to secure. If necessary, tighten the castle nut to align the cotter pin holes. Then, push the dust cap onto the wheel and ensure it is fully seated. Finally, lower the vehicle completely. For more information, see your authorized Polaris dealer or visit Polaris.com.